Thank you, everyone. So my name is Dan Joseph, and I work at the American Red Cross in their International Services Department, where I explore with the rest of the global Red Cross and Red Crescent network how we can better respond, prepare for, and recover from disasters using data and technology. Tonight, I want to talk to you why I'm excited about using street-level imagery for climate change risk reduction, and why I'm excited about putting cameras on things, preferably things that move. So these days, you can get pretty high-quality imagery from a consumer-grade sport action camera like the GoPro Max 360, and a lot of them have onboard GPS. And you might be saying, but Dan, hasn't people already done this? And they have, but it costs money to access their imagery. And at $7 per 1,000 images, that doesn't seem like that much, but if you're trying to get imagery for an entire city, it definitely adds up. Also, you are restricted to imagery from when and where they want to go. So it might be the wrong season, it might be too old, it might be only navigable roads unless the area you're interested in happens to be a place of special interest, like a national park or something that Google has done a special project to collect the imagery there. And so you might also then be saying, but Dan, don't satellites see everything? And while satellite coverage is certainly improving every day, at least temporally, if not spatially, at least for those of us outside of government spy agencies, you are still kind of running into those same limitations. You are restricted to imagery from when and where those companies want to collect the scenes, and it can be quite expensive to access that imagery. And so with street-level imagery, additionally, you get kind of a unique perspective and a level of detail that simply is not possible with satellite coverage. So hopefully, you accept that I'm going to put a camera on my bicycle helmet and run around the city. So why am I interested in doing this? The global Red Cross Red Crescent network responds to all kinds of disasters, and having data can help us respond more efficiently and better to those disasters. One such disaster is extreme heat, something we're increasingly facing in urban areas, especially as climate change progresses. A Red Cross or Red Crescent National Society might want to help a community by setting up a cooling center. Having data on which areas of a city are most at risk of urban heat will help them locate that cooling center effectively. Conveniently, a data layer that might help you dig into this is urban vegetation. The more tree canopy cover and bushes you have, the more evapotranspiration that's going to be occurring, the more shade you might have. And so in theory, those areas with more vegetation are going to be more resilient to urban heat. And conveniently, trees and bushes are something you can quite easily pick out and see in street level imagery. This was kind of inspired by a project from a number of years ago by the MIT Sensible City Lab, where they used Google Street View imagery to analyze the levels of canopy cover across several cities around the world as kind of a climate awareness project. Apologies to anybody who's green-red colorblind. I didn't make this map, but you can see how the tree canopy cover in this city is not equitably distributed. And so if you were doing an urban greening program or something like that, you could use this map to help target your programs. Bonus jar hit points to anybody who can identify the city. So hopefully you kind of are accepting that this is a legitimate project. There's some cool things that we can do with street imagery, and it's worth collecting. And you might be asking, so Dan, what have you actually have done in this space so far? And unfortunately the answer is, like, we're still kind of in the early phases of exploring this. I've been working with a number of volunteers from another local meetup, Civic Tech DC, to build out a Python-based toolkit for ingesting, processing, and analyzing this street level imagery, and we're pretty close to having kind of a working MVP. But hopefully we'll be really soon digging into some new exciting things, and I'll have a reason to be up in front of you again in the near future. We want to finish, test, and refine. So as I said, we're pretty close to building out that MVP. And after that, I'm working with some folks in the Indonesian Red Cross who are super excited about testing this in some of the urban areas where they work. And the feedback from them will help us further refine and prioritize what improvements we do to the software. Then there's all sorts of additional kind of avenues of exploration. I mentioned, that we know about satellites and chose to collect streetable imagery instead, but also satellites still have a value add. They can collect a lot more imagery a lot quicker than we can with ground-based measurements, and also have the convenience of being able to capture where we might not be able to go. So a dense urban area with large residential blocks with parks in the middle that we can't get to on the roads, maybe dense informal settlements, or high urban buildings that mess up the GPS when we're traveling through with our ground level cameras. And so satellite imagery might be an interesting way to fill in any gaps that we have from measurements we take on the ground. When you go beyond kind of what the human eye can detect and what your standard kind of action cams are detecting, there's additional interesting analyses you might be able to do. So if you have a camera that can or a camera sensor that can capture the near infrared band, you can combine that with visible red light to calculate something called the NDVI, the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. And this can actually give you an indication of how healthy or stressed vegetation is. So all sorts of interesting applications in nature-based solutions and urban greening for something like that. There's also other sensors that might be useful. So in addition to collecting visible features and attributes of the surroundings, you might be able to collect, as you're going around a city, temperature measurements, humidity measurements, and also things like particulate matter, and build a more complete picture of kind of health risks and other hazards to people. The World Bank has been doing some pretty interesting work using streetable imagery to detect building attributes as part of a structural resilience project. So this could be interesting for Red Cross disaster risk reduction. You could also look at additional things like building height for casting shadows, maybe the space between buildings for airflow, and tie that to those aspects of the urban landscape to heat risk, if looking at it from a climate lens. And the list is really endless of what you might be able to detect in streetable imagery. There's some interesting research I've stumbled across where they're using imagery detection algorithms to automatically detect trash in outdoor areas. I'm not sure what knowing the areas where people have left beer bottles on the sidewalk will help you in terms of climate resilience, but I'm sure in terms of urban planning, it might help you more equitably distribute municipal services. And one final point of interest, especially to the Red Cross Red Crescent Global Network, is potentially using streetable imagery for disaster assessment. So being able to collect imagery after a major disaster and then automatically detect things like damages so you can track reconstruction, prioritize areas that are hardest hit, and things like that. So if any of this has kind of sparked your interest, there are lots of ways to get involved. As I mentioned, I've been working with another Meetup group, Civic Tech DC. You can find them on Meetup, and they meet, I think now twice a month, and do a variety of social good technology projects. I've been working with them and several volunteers, one who is here tonight, Jay, thank you very much, to build out kind of that initial toolkit. And if I'm being honest, I'm not the best coder, so I mostly kind of advise and ask people to help. I don't actually do much of the coding, so you'll be coding more for the project, not with me, but still much appreciated. You can build things with me. So I mentioned kind of other sensors. I've been exploring how to, at low cost, collect those other measurements. So words like Arduino and single board computing kind of makes you get excited. There might be a place for you in helping out in building out this project. Additionally, the data is nothing if it's not linked to information and then informing decision making or helping people advocate for a better future. So if you are a researcher, have GIS skills or graphic design skills, and want to get involved with turning that data into actionable insights, let me know as well. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.